So the closed beta of Ghost Frontline 2 took a pretty long time for me to get a firm grasp on. Plenty of content creators has already talked about the game, but I doubt 99% of them has even played Ghost Frontline 1, Project NeuroCloud, or even knows about Reverse Collapse. The thing is, Ghost Frontline is a surprisingly large IP that goes under the radar for a lot of people. And it has a lot of lore depth that comes with a word count that even makes the Fate franchise nod in approval. I'm personally a large fan of Ghost Frontline. Before Nikkei became a thing, Ghost Frontline 1 was my favorite gacha game, even though I barely played it because it's a very hard game to get into and maintain, and it takes resource management into an entirely new level. But in preparation for Ghost Frontline 2, I actually went back and played Ghost Frontline 1 for a few months, primarily to tell myself that I'm a big boy now and I can catch up on the story. Now that I played Ghost Frontline 2 and done all I could for the most part, I'm pretty confident in my impressions, and I can speak as someone who loves the franchise and also from the perspective of someone who plays other games. And as it stands right now, I feel Ghost Frontline 2 has a lot of hurdles to overcome if they want to have a firm grasp on the Western player base. So I'll explain that. I want to first start with what works, and that is the artwork and the character designs and the production value in general. They're all top tier. It's some of the best I've seen in a gacha game. It's definitely a treat to see the legacy characters fully realized in 3D, especially when they first started as little chibi characters that had to rely on their PNGs for you to get attached to. This is something that they had to nail down perfectly, and they did. Along with the sound design and the voice work, I feel that for the majority of people, getting attached to these characters won't be a problem. The dorm system is also a thing, and while it's not as robust as Snowbreak's, it's probably adequate for most people. I can't really tell because I'm just not really that into dorm systems in general. I'm more of a story person. But at least from what I heard, the dorm system has been very well approved. There's also the affinity system, and if you max it out, you're able to use an oath ring so that you can technically marry your doll, though not really. You can just say it's symbolism for how much you care about your waifu. Like I said, all this is all good stuff. But I think what's going to catch a lot of new people off guard is going to be the narrative of the game. The narrative is a visual novel style. It starts off pretty well, but then eventually it'll get to the point where you start to realize that you're missing some context. And if you want to fully understand the story, you probably want to take the time to go back to Ghost Frontline 1 and give it a read. And as a person who has just did that, it takes quite a long time to get through the game. It has 7 years worth of content after all. There are other ways to view the game's story. There is the cutscene interpreter, and there are story summaries on the wiki. I do not recommend reading the manga or watching the anime because they do deviate from the source material. Personally, for me, I chose the cutscene interpreter, and I do believe that is the best way to view the story if you don't want to play through the game. And I'm very confident in saying a lot of people do not want to play through the game. Ghost Frontline is very special in many different ways. That said, I do have to stress the Ghost Frontline story is very large. And then there's the fact that Ghost Frontline does not shy away from making you read either. It's effectively a visual novel with a game on top of it. Now, if you are a fan of Ghost Frontline, this is nothing new. But people coming into this expect the game to be something along the lines of Nikkei or Snowbreak, where there's little bits of info sprinkled in between gameplay to keep you going. They might be in for a shock. While those games lean very heavily on the harem aspect, Ghost Frontline does not, and it kind of never has. To put it in anime terms, if Nikkei and Snowbreak treat itself as an eroge, then Ghost Frontline treats itself as a seinen. Meaning, while all three of these games are tailored towards adults, they all have their different priorities. All that to say, if people were going to get into Ghost Frontline 2 and expect a good dose of fun, or to have some sexy robot girls fawn over you, they might be left disappointed. There have been and will be moments where your T-dolls will express their affection for you, especially during side events or anniversary events, but the story as a whole takes itself very seriously. and prioritizes natural bonding over forced affinity. As such, I don't think we'll be seeing our waifu holding commander dolls anytime soon. But let's talk about gameplay real quick. The game has a very strong foundation. It's an XCOM style gameplay. If you don't know what XCOM is, it's basically a tactical RPG that is grid-based. So you can think of it as along the lines of Fire Emblem. So this game is going to prioritize good positioning, having a good strategy, character building, and forging good teams. Having a large and robust roster is going to affect you more in this gacha game than, say, Zenless Zone Zero. And in my personal opinion, the game is pretty fun, but story mode is pretty sleep-inducing, if not coma-inducing, purely because of how easy it is. So, for reference, I decided to use auto battle just to see how far auto battle could take me throughout the entire game. And for story mode content, we currently have 6 chapters in a CBT, and that's probably how it's going to be at launch. And I was able to auto through almost all of it. So there's about 10 to 14 stages per chapter, and there's only 3 stages where I had to turn off autoplay and play manually. And a lot of that is for factors that the AI just can't handle. But for the rest of the game, autoplay was able to breeze through most missions. And for me, this is very disappointing because, I like to be able to at least think while I play my games. Now, I have played auto battlers before. In fact, one of the games I'm currently hooked on right now is an auto battler. So it's not something that fully bothers me, but this isn't meant to be an auto battle game. You're supposed to be able to play the game throughout and have some control of your tactics. That said, I don't actually mind this too much. And the big reason why is because story is definitely the priority in story mode. In the side content and in-game content, the challenge is definitely there. I wouldn't say it becomes balls hard or anything like that. It's definitely not at the level of Ghost Frontline 1, I'll tell you that much. But for any person who is not adept in tactical RPGs, I can see them struggling in quite a few of these in-game maps. And I think that is a good way to go about it. From what I've researched, originally, when the game first came out in China, there were a lot of complaints that the story mode was too hard. Now, people had told me that wasn't actually the case, but we're all people who play games regularly. So it was probably the casual audience that wasn't really into this type of thing. So as a result, the game's story mode was pretty much nerfed to the ground. So it's not like they don't want to make the game hard. It's just that the player base they're trying to tap into are just not up for that. Now, I will say right now that I am just not the target when it comes to story mode, because I like my games to be balls hard. I am a speedrunner after all. So being able to think and use your brain and be fully engaged in the gameplay is something I really enjoy doing. But I feel the majority of people just aren't like that. As far as me criticizing how story mode actually is, I just can't do that because I'm just not the target. I do get a lot of my fun in in-game maps and PvP. And as a person who probably enjoys story above all else, I'm fully engaged in story mode no matter what. The point I'm actually trying to make here is that I feel the biggest hurdle Ghost Frontline 2 is going to have at the beginning is the first impression of story mode. I can see a lot of people getting filtered out because they don't care about story mode, they have no interest in the story, and it takes way too long to get through chapters. Now, if you're not a story person, you probably shouldn't be playing Ghost Frontline in the first place, just saying. But we do know from the China version, they do make the gameplay more robust and have more diversity as time goes on. The global servers is going to be a year behind from the Chinese servers, which in my opinion is a bad thing. But I can at least say up front that as long as you hold out, when we get that content, the game is going to get better and it will tap into more of its potential. The last thing I'll talk about is the gacha system. It's basically the Hoyoverse system with some quality of life put into it. The big thing though is that the standard banner does have 5-star weapons in its pool, while the rate up banners do not. Those are character only. So the standard banner is going to be not good to pull on at all. At least not until they make some changes, which I do believe they have made changes in the Chinese version. So maybe we'll get that at launch. Probably not, because it's not in the closed beta test. But either way, you should only be using the standard tickets for the standard banner anyways. You shouldn't be spending your actual currency. That's kind of a thing for all gacha games with a few exceptions. I don't really know what the monthly income is. We only have the CBT for a little over a week. And also the CBT itself gave us extra currency, so that skews numbers. But we do know that battle passes will have SSR weapons, and character reruns will be very frequent. I think the gacha system, even though it is Hoyoversified and it's known for being a pretty bad system, I think it'll be okay for here in Ghost Frontline 2, because at least from what I talked to from other people that play the Chinese version, they're very generous with how much currency that we get per month. Now, for the question of will I be playing this game at launch and will I be covering this on the channel, the answer is yes. Obviously, I said up front that I'm a huge fan of Ghost Frontline, and I already love this game. It's not even a problem for me. I'll probably be sticking with it through thick and thin, to be honest. But as far as will the game get a solid foothold on the global market like how Nikkei does, that remains to be seen. That's very hard to tell. But my guess is going to be no, and that's purely because of what the gameplay actually is. Not that it's nuanced or is this difficulty or anything like that, but literally that the gameplay is a tactical RPG, which is already niche in the first place. Now, for the most part, Ghost Frontline is a niche franchise. It's mainly held together by its very strong cult following. And even though Ghost Frontline 1 barely makes any money, it still has a lot of fans, hopes, and dreams. I do think Ghost Frontline 2 can become that game that can finally tap into an audience that is different from what it already has. And I think that is the most important thing it can do. This franchise has a lot going for it. It's fantastic. And for me personally, I hope it does very well. So if any of this makes you interested in playing the game, it does come out in the first week of December, as long as nothing fatal comes up during the CBT. So if you decide to give it a try, I hope to see you here again.